He's actually defining specific things that I can go, oh, I can look up that chemical, I can look up that plant, and I can verify everything he's saying. When somebody says that starch is good for me, though, they just say it's good for me, and I can't find any evidence other than a lot of different places that all say starch is good for me.
Lewis, how did you find carnivore?
Well, as per usual, hello, Dave, like everyone likes to say. But as also per usual, I guess we're going back in time a bit. Uh, Starting out, I was just like anybody else, eating the standard fare, whatever mom and dad made, and whatever they were making was probably what everyone was selling. Uh, then I went off to college and I started finding out what I needed to do. So I started buying what everyone else was selling. And then finally, when I got out of college, I was like, what am I doing? So about 13-ish years ago now, I started researching diets, ways of eating and such. And the first one I tried, sadly, was the starch diet. Don't recommend it, a little gassy. Followed up by a variant of that vegan diet, but with a little less starch. Still pretty gassy, also gaining weight. Uh, I tried a couple variants of keto over the course of 10 years. They would work. You lose the weight, it all falls off, you feel great, but keto allows you to have a carb here and there. So I allowed myself to, indulge every once in a while. And every once in a while, when life gets hard, things that you used to allow yourself, you allow too much in when times get hard. So over that 10 or so years that I was doing keto instead of all the other experiments, it it was up and down. Be a good year and then it'd be a bad year, and it'd be a good 2 years and it'd be a bad 2 years. It was a little upsetting. Yeah, it's not that I hadn't heard of carnivore before then, like because what I'm doing now, but they all sounded crazy. Every time you hear somebody talk about carnivore when you're in some of the keto servers online in the forums, is like, what do you mean absolutely no carbs? I'm not trying to, eliminate everything, but they uh, they just all sounded like too extreme. And I don't know, it doesn't matter which country you're in, there's always something extreme in your country, and that extreme is always something that feels like you should avoid it. So I avoided carnivore. I regret that now, because now going back 1 year ago, almost today, I started carnivore. I went and got blood results taken beforehand because I wanted to prove to some people that it was a good thing. And then I got some blood results 3 months later, and I got some blood results a few days ago. Uh, they were a little chaotic. So because I was keto for the past 10 years, my blood results were actually perfect. Day one, day zero of carnivore, my blood results were perfectly fine, which is, I think, to be expected. The 3 month results, they cranked a little high. Uh, and my doctor, he kind of suggested that I do the statin thing. Of course, I said no. Went on with my year and such. And then I go in a few days ago, get fresh blood results, and they're back to normal again, which I'm noticing on interviews that you on your channel and interview and different testimonials from people across the internet is a pretty consistent story. A few months in, your cholesterol spikes and goes very high. Makes doctors nervous, of course. But then within like 1 to 2 years later, it's all fine. It's consistent, and I really appreciate that consistency that I'm starting to see. Not that I'm hearing of any studies writing that down, but I see it, and I appreciate that.
So can I ask, what was it that 1 year ago, what was it that finally made you go, well, maybe this isn't as crazy as I thought it was, and give it a try?
couldn't say I remember exactly, but in general, I think it was probably a YouTube video of some kind. No, it was Anthony Chafee, Dr. Anthony Chafee. I was watching a little documentary video at one of his "Plants Are Trying to Kill You" videos, and I can't say which one for sure because almost every single one of his videos, or if not half of them, all say that same line. But I was watching one of them, and it caught me off guard enough to make me question the status quo and initiate a new realm of research. So, like back when I did the starch diet and all those other crazy diet experiments, including keto, even keto, when I tried keto, I did a ton of research. I looked for the experts. I looked what they were saying. I looked for the whys. Everyone's got a why. Um, but a lot of those whys were not really scientific. It felt like they felt that you could feel them. The why like resonated with me in pretty much every one of those scenarios. But when Anthony Chafee says plants are trying to kill you, and then he starts explaining chemical, 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 and the why each chemical does what it does, it's like, oh, well, I mean, he's actually defining specific things, things that I can go, oh, I can look up that chemical, I can look up that plant, and I can verify everything he's saying. When somebody says that starch is good for me, though, they just say it's good for me, and I can't find any evidence other than a lot of different places that all say starch is good for me. Whereas the Anthony Chafee says this chemical in this plant is bad for you, and I can like go, oh yeah, that chemical is bad for me. So there was a realm of clarity that came to me, which then turned into a couple of months of research. I probably watched that video sometime in October or November of 2023, and then kind of decided on January to get started. And I didn't start on January 1st, which is what most people do. I'd started on January 17th, but oh well.
And in that year, what kind of changes have you seen?
Within the first 3 months, I shrunk down 45 pounds from 265 pounds to 220 pounds. I've maintained that 220 pounds the entire time until now, except for this last month where I was doing an experiment with half and half and heavy cream. Should have remembered that there's lactose in dairy products, but that was an oops, and I put 10 pounds back on. But it's going away now, so I've stopped.
And how tall are you?
I am 6 foot on a good day, but according to the doctor, I'm now 5 foot 10 and a half.
Yeah, and anything else you've noticed?
Oh, the clarity of mind. It's insane. Uh, you don't really understand what it means to be clear if you've been in the fog for your whole life and that's your normal. And then like something I noticed back during the keto age, because keto does a lot of the similar things that carnivore does. Just it's just slightly more annoying to cook. Uh, but a lot of the effects I noticed early on in keto, which was the pains that you didn't know you had, like realizing that, oh, when I twist my body in a certain way, my lower back would hurt. And then that one time after doing keto for several months, you do a twist and you look and you're just in a daze and you're like, wait, there's something missing. Oh right, my back used to hurt when I would twist. Why doesn't it anymore? And then you start putting the pieces together and click, 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 and then everybody's like, oh shoot, it was because of the way I was eating. I was inflamed. Can't believe I didn't realize these things sooner. And then you go watch a bunch of different testimonials on YouTube, like on your channel, and you just hear these people talking about things they've noticed. And then you're watching them talk about it. And then you're like, wait, me too. I didn't even realize. I can't even like list how many different things I've noticed.
How's your doctor reacted? Because of course, at first it was, "Oh my goodness, look at your cholesterol," but now if your cholesterol is more normal now, isn't your doctor happy?
So we just do a informal note after. So okay, I go into my appointment. I do the pre-appointment with the nurse, do all that info. Then I have my appointment with my doctor, and then I go get lab work done. And then the afterward, when he makes his notes on the lab work, is just sent to me online. It's not a phone call or anything. I could request a phone call, but I never do because I don't want to spend that time. Uh, in my very first visit, we had an extended visit. He actually decided to work a smidge late because I had what I was talking to him about, and he wanted to understand what I was doing before I went and proceeded. We got lots of blood work taken. It all looked normal, and his note afterwards, after reading my blood work, was that he is interested in monitoring my situation, et cetera, et cetera. At the 3 month one, same story. Go through the pre visit, do the visit, talk about how things were going, get the lab work done, and then in his note, he was like, "Yes, I understand your notion that you do not want a statin, but I do need to recommend one, et cetera, et cetera." This time, however, is kind of interesting. He, again, same spiel. I go into the appointment. We talk about what I've been doing and his requirement to continue recommending a statin if my cholesterol's still high. And then I'm like, well, based on what I've seen, people's cholesterol generally goes down by this time. I'll probably be back in the normal. But he's like, oh, but it might be higher. I'm like, okay, we'll get the lab work done. Let's just say when I got the note back on the lab work, because my blood results were back to perfectly normal, he didn't say much. He only said one sentence, and it looks like everything's normal. And I don't know whether he's just avoiding confirming or just not going to waste time with banter because I was right and just, let me accept that I'm doing something good.
So, how have people around you reacted to the change they see in your appearance and also when they see you eating?
Well, they don't see me eating, but when they talk to me about it and, I start talking about how I only eat meat, you do get the crazy eye, whether that's from a coworker or a friend. I don't really get the crazy eye from my fiance anymore, but she knows that I've done my research compared to those other people. They don't know. They don't know who I am in and my home life and when I'm spending my time doing research on myself and my self improvement and such. Um, the really fun one is playing the heads or tails game of, is the waitress or waiter at the restaurant, when you say, I don't want any toppings on my burger or a bun or the fries, and could I get extra burgers? When their eye starts twitching and their head starts tilting and they're like, are you sure? That's always fun. Until you go to like a really good steakhouse, and then you go to the really good steakhouses and you're like, I just want a steak, I want it blue rare, and I just want the steak, maybe a pat of butter. And they don't even bat an eye. And they're like, yeah, we'll bring it right out. And I'm like, cool, this is where I belong.
So, that's interesting. Like, if you and your fiance are going out for dinner, what do you do? Is it always to a steakhouse?
Generally just try to look up places that do like a steak. I tend to avoid anything that's like your average Mexican restaurant. Generally average Mexican restaurants, they won't have anything that's like a steak. Really nice Mexican restaurants will have fajitas, and you can get plain fajita meat, and it's generally a little marinated, but like I'll take the lesser light marination evil over the eating the chips and the the other vegetable toppings, the pico de gallo, etc. Um, at most restaurants, though, you can get a burger or a steak. Now it's going to end up costing you a pretty penny to get just the burger, because a lot of restaurants will probably charge you for the whole price of a platter burger, even though you only ordered the patty. But you do what you got to do to try and be normal.
Right. And what is your menu like day to day?
For the last 8 or 9 months, quite literally just a 1 pound brick of ground beef for lunch and a 1 pound brick of ground beef for dinner, with a added butter as needed. Um, oh, and I do a lot of work to get clean water. Um, that's pretty much the only things I eat. It has been a lot of work with my butcher that I found. Speaking of, I had to go through like 7 butchers around me. I live in a big city environment, but the problem is that a lot of these big city butchers, they're kind of like a chain of butchers across the city, and they have internal rules. They don't do a discount if you don't get the meat cut up. They don't do a discount for uh like bulk orders. It's like, oh, you want a steak of ribeye? That's $25 a pound. You want the entire whole ribeye? That's still $25 a pound. What do you mean? So when I finally found a good butcher that like will work with me, I started ordering ground beef, and I had it have been tweaking the recipe that I have them do each time. The very first time I just ordered a really small batch and I had them just do like 80/20 standard beef, but I had them throw into like the like 80-pound batch. I had them throw a beef heart and a beef kidney and a beef tongue and beef liver, just like a pack from their freezers of each in there into the mix, just to get it a little more ancestral. Not because I think I need it, but because I don't know, it adds a little difference. It's not going to be just perfectly meat and fat. It's going to be have a little bit more variety to each bite. Now, over the months, I've been slowly tweaking that. It went up to 75/25 for my next batch, which I ordered 150 pounds and got a half chest freezer so that I could fit it all. Um, a few months ago, I ordered 70/30, and that was even better. I'm really enjoying the fat content. And I ordered 150 pounds, the literal limit that my freezer can hold. And then when that emptied out, I decided to bump it up one more time a couple of weeks ago when I got my next order of 65/35 with a even higher ratio of about 13% organ meats mixed in, and it is phenomenal. Uh, I back when I first started doing the hamburger thing, I was worried as much as everyone else is worried that like, oh, without any variety, you're gonna you're gonna go crazy. You're gonna want something. And you know what? Early on, I would agree. I had too low of a fat content of ground beef, and like there was no variety, and it's really hard. Just being able to basically only add salt or like really good fish sauce, uh, that helped, but only a little. Um, but as that fat content kept rising, it just keeps getting better and better. And boredom isn't the word anymore. It's excitement. I go home for lunch from work and I go grab that pound that I put out the night before it's thawing. I throw that in the pan and I'm just like, I can't even wait the 5 minutes that I'm going to cook that thing. I want to eat it now. I haven't quite done that yet. I know some people talk about eating ground beef raw, and I do trust my butcher enough. I barely cook it. I sear it on both sides. It's thawed to room temperature and then seared on both sides, so it's only just it's raw but warm in the middle. It's seared on the outside. I mostly just do that to get a little bit of texture and flavor on the outside of it more than anything, not so much to like cook it through. The uh, the idea of doing it raw, I just can't get my brain past the pink slime issue. It looks like pink slime. I'm not exactly excited to just take a spoonful and throw that in my mouth. But maybe someday. But right now, at my 65/35, I don't think at this point, if when I get my next batch in a couple of months, that I will raise it again. I think I'm going to probably maintain at the 65/35, mostly because what I was doing before with uh, the lesser fat content batches is that I was adding butter to each sitting just to make sure that I was satisfied. I don't need to add butter anymore. Now that I'm up to this ratio, it's so good.
Oh, nice. That's great. It's nice when you can find that kind of nice balance for you as well. Like it's just that you're always looking forward to it and it always tastes good. That's great. Um, so at this stage, do you feel like it's carnivore all the way for you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'll always be experimenting for self-improvement purposes. But right now, my big experiment is exercise related, just trying to nail down what works for me, what I'm willing to keep doing, what actually is, going to cause a benefit. I can't say for certain that I won't do tweaks to my diet, but predominantly, like, yeah, it's going to be meat all the way. I think the only thing I could consider potentially in the future is maybe if some study comes out saying that, like, oh, this new synthetic molecule, if you take it, will cause some significant benefit. We've done double-blind trials and all the science behind it. Like, maybe I'll consider something like that in the future. But as it comes from a food macro standpoint, no, no, there's no reason to get off of this. Whether you're talking going back and looking at ancestral reasonings as to why, or whether you're looking at current data trends, uh, the what was that Minnesota coronary study that was done that the results were hidden in some guy's basement for I don't know 30 years. Like you can see the trends in there. It just there's too many things pointing to it that make sense. Now I understand why I sound crazy when I talk to somebody else about these different reasons as to why, because each one of these little bits by itself seems like nothing in the grand scheme of our world. Like trying to sell somebody's like, oh yeah, it's what people did greater than 10,000 years ago. Well, they can't relate to that. Today is today. That was so far back that they don't even know who that was. Well, then there's data from the 1970s when they were doing this one trial, and they're like, well, this isn't the 1970s. I can't relate, and it's science. It's not a language I understand. Well, look at me. This is what I did. Well, I mean, yeah, you're a nice guy and all, but
Yeah. So you mentioned exercise there. So since you've been doing carnivore, are you feeling like more of a does it feel like your body actually wants to move more?
um, I think during that initial transition when the fat is quite literally melting off of you, yes, I felt that itch, that want to move, and I think that internal theory, process of that fat melting off of you is quite literally the fat going out of your adipose cells into your bloodstream and distributed amongst the body so that everything can use it. And when it's in that state, it means you have an excess of available energy. And yeah, during that state of like that first 3 months of January through March, yeah, I couldn't sit still. I renewed my climbing membership that I used to have pre 2020. Um, Went back to climbing. Couldn't quite get my friends back into it, but they're slowly working their way back into it. Um, Been trying to line up a calisthenics routine that works for me. Um, Little things like that. And during that first 3 months, yeah, couldn't sit still. You couldn't keep me still. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be working out. I wanted to be climbing a wall. Now I do feel somewhat, I would say, back to normal now that the fat loss stage is over and I'm at my stability point. Even though I'd like to be lower, but I'm at my stability point right now. Um, but I wouldn't say I feel as active as I did during that little dropping stage. For me, being like a little under 6 foot and 265 pounds at the beginning, that's not huge. I'm not the biggest boy by any means. The majority of my weight was in my gut, though, so it was pronounced. It just wasn't. I'm not humongous. But now that I'm down to 220, I'm still a big boy. I've still got a little bit of a gut, etc. Uh, I'm not the best at rock climbing, etc. But my energy level is still higher than it used to be back when I ate poorly. Of course, I'm not sitting on the couch as much. I have regularly scheduled activities, the morning exercise routine and the twice weekly climbing with friends now. Thank goodness that they had availability. Twice weekly, that's when I move around the house, maybe doing chores movement. I wouldn't say I move too much more than I used to before carnivore. It just doesn't hurt anymore.
Right. So, Lewis, if you were giving someone advice about starting carnivore based on your experience, what would you tell them to do?
Sadly, that they need to do their own reading, and that it's not that I won't answer questions. I always tell them the first thing that I want you to do is to go research this on your own. Find your own sources, because if it's not yours, then it's not yours. If you're just doing what I tell you to do, then it's on me, and when it fails, I'm to blame. That's why they need to do their research so that when they see the scenario where they decide whether they go forward or back, it was their decision to start in the first place. And then when they get started down that path, yes, please ask me as many questions as you can. I'll point you towards as many things as I can think of, whether that be one of the popular carnivore doctors, or helping you do certain keyword searches on various like scholarly websites to try and find an article that kind of can help nail down a thought you're on, or even just to kind of chat about how it feels when you're in a certain state. Like some of the recent things I learned about keto flu, and how it's not so much a flu anymore. We're pretty much realizing that it's actually just addiction withdrawals from sugar, which, now that I've gone through that so many times, going on and off keto for years and experienced it so many times, it makes a lot more sense how consistent it was.
Nice. So Lewis, how can people reach out to you? Do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
I avoid social media, but I am part of a carnivore Discord, and I did ask the owner of said Discord if he would allow me to share it, and he said I could.
Oh, awesome. So I'll link to that in the show notes. Um, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Lewis. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time, Dave.